We're going through it. And so we ensconced ourselves in the back of the congregation, hiding ourselves and watching. And all of a sudden, the pastor got up in front and he said, "Let us welcome all those who are visitors today." And the four of us, there was no way we were going to make ourselves known, hiding there in the back. And then all of a sudden, all the congregation members just stood up. And then we looked at them and we go, "Uh-oh." And then we quickly stood up ourselves. But we were too late. We had been found, and we had been, these throngs came around us, and we're all looking at each other, wishing one of us had had some deodorant or something like that. But anyway, to be very intentional about your welcoming is wonderful. I do know many of you, but in some ways, when we all come to worship and celebrate the love of Christ, we all know each other, and I could feel that in the room. So thank you very much. What are we going to talk about? I think Mercedes Benclude came in and she talked about some of the socialization that goes with aging. Aging is a lot of different things. I am a geriatric specialist within the scope of family medicine. I have run the palliative care service at the University of Iowa hospitals and clinics, taught people who've gone on to be medical directors at hospices. So there's a range of the sort of teaching that I've done with the elderly, but what exactly is the elderly? What are older people? Recall that 65 is totally artificial, and that was made by the New Deal back in the 30s. Financially and politically, it was convenient back for President Roosevelt to say that 65 was when all of a sudden Americans are older. That actually worked out pretty well because there weren't many Americans who were that beyond age 65. So the age 85 is the other sort of milestone. Between 65 and 85, we refer to you in the business as being young old. If you're over 85, you are old. We are going to get to the point where you're going to be old when you get past 100. Some of you recall there was a day when once an American turned beyond 100, what happened?
Oh, they got a letter.
They got a letter from the President of the United States. That so does not happen anymore because there are so many Americans who are age 100. And so the demographics have changed significantly with people, as far as getting older. So 65 really isn't old anymore, and I guess you are as old as you feel. So as we discuss things, and as far as aging, I can give you hints on aging if you are 100, 85, or 70. It's all very different in many different ways. And if there's some confusion in what I'm talking about, I'm going to try and be clear what kind of old I'm talking about when we discuss things. In your handouts in front of you is something people are, usually when physicians get up and we talk about wellness, one, we don't do that very much. There is something called the Medicare Wellness Evaluation that was sort of invented as part of the Obamacare Act. And what now is that we, physicians and providers, you recall, are nurse practitioners and physician's assistants as well. We didn't get used to get paid for preventive. We would add on other stuff, and we would throw in the prevention as just sort of an add-on. We now get paid for doing preventive things, and if it is someone who is on Medicare, it is called a Medicare Wellness Evaluation, for those of us who wondered what this thing is. And it is a visit that is devoted entirely to prevention, but it's not. There's hardly anyone who comes in who just wants to talk about prevention because everybody has something else that they want to talk about as well. So we always fold that in. You may notice because you get charged twice, which annoys a lot of different people. Usually when I say that, I prefer to be sitting or standing closer to the door. But that is what a Medicare Wellness Evaluation is, that a physician does, or a PA or a nurse practitioner, to talk about preventive sorts of issues. And when we talk about preventive issues, we get very scientific-y, and we bore people. And so this is something called the Blue Zones. And you may recall that this came out a couple of years ago, about 20 years ago. It also sort of resurrected about 5 or 8 years ago. A lot of corporations and businesses and faith congregations in the community all around the country grabbed onto blue zones as a way of becoming a blue zone congregation, a blue zone corporation, and helping people get well. So there have been several times you may have heard about blue zones over the last 20 years. The reason I use it when I teach my residents and students how to teach about wellness is that it is written in English. It is understandable and it makes sense. A physician can get lost very quick into chemical and molecular processes before you know it. So what this is Dan Buettner, who was a National Geographic photojournalist many years ago, who noticed, not quite accurately, but there were certain places in the world where people routinely were more likely to live to be beyond 100 years of age. And he called these the blue zones, and some of these are here in front of you. Okinawa, Japan has been removed because, well, what happened is that some epidemiologists and gerontologists started to look at these and said, no, I don't think they quite fit it. Well, who cares? Because all these places had the spirit of longevity. And so that's what's important. And so they talked about the Power 9 sorts of things, and we're going to go through these. The first one is definitely the most important. I have this graph that I show my residents, and what it is, it has someone's age on the x-axis. It has their velocity that they walk, 10 meters, on the y-axis. And then you sit there and you look at it, you time the person, and you can tell you when they are going to die on the basis of this with remarkable certainty. And the residents go, well, I've got all sorts of lab tests and imaging and all sorts of fancy scientific things. And I said, but this is actually the best. I'm going, why don't we teach it? Well, you can't charge for it. But what happens is quite remarkable. And most of us know that to be true. If someone comes into the congregation and they're now moving slower, and it isn't because they just broke their leg or something like that. It's something that is not immediately reversible. What do we say? Oh, they're slowing down. And then we start to think that, well, maybe things are progressing. Maybe they're getting a little bit older. So this graph is something that we all intuitively know. When people ask me, what do I put down on an Iowa certificate of death when someone dies? And now, because back in the days, the vast majority of people would at least get or consider a post-mortem autopsy. We no longer do that. It's because of a change of values. It's also the fact we have such advanced imagery with CAT scans and MRI that we pretty much know what's going on. But you'd be surprised how many times we don't know what leads to someone's death. But it is the tradition now of Americans not to really ask. In fact, many of my colleagues won't even ask you because of the emotionality of the moment. But things have changed quite a bit, and now you may not even be asked. And if you're asked overwhelmingly, when a loved one dies, you will say no to a postmortem. And so we don't really know what causes it. And so we get the Iowa certificate of death, and I need to write on it. And sometimes I'm feeling particularly snarky, or many of the times I'm feeling particularly snarky, and I put on it, what is the number one thing that leads to our death?
Heart disease?
Ah, you're all getting very sciencey. It's gravity. If you take a look at the various organ-specific basis for death, it is based on the body's all of a sudden failure when no longer it pushes against gravity. Pneumonia, heart disease, dementia, infections, all occur when you do not move. And so the first blue zone is move naturally. And what that means is that, now move naturally, what is the naturally about? Oh, it should be very obvious now. I walk home from the hospital and I will see someone race by me on an electric scooter who has no business going that speed. That is not natural movement. But moving naturally is critical and important to aging gracefully. Even if you are 95, 85, 75, or 65, the pushing against gravity is hard. These smartwatches that people have that will measure what sort of amount of time, that's actually pretty helpful, and it tells you and nags you explicitly that you have not moved. And so you constantly have to move. And people have this sense that you have to exercise. By the way, we have that. You need to exercise 2.5 hours per week, where you get your heart rate above 105 beats per minute. That is our scientific way of taking a look at that, with some stretching and resistance training as well. But what does that movement mean? I mean, you can be 95, and if you just get up and transfer yourself to a wheelchair and move yourself in that wheelchair to the dining hall, you will get your heart rate up above 105, and you will meet that criteria. You are moving naturally for your age. So anything that we can do to get us moving. Yeah.
My wife, Polly, used to say that I had 2 speeds. I was either fast or fast asleep. So I move a lot.
And that is a broad characteristic about your personality. But movement is extremely, and many times what we're doing is we're just trying to get people at any stage in your aging to move. And even if moving, everyone's thinking you've got to run a marathon, but if you're just getting up and about and walking, that is good. Like when you all say, please rise as you are able. That is just being, sensitive to that. But hopefully people do get to move, and people who can't move much, that's extremely important. There's a reason that is #1 in the blue zones, is because that is by and far the most important things. And frankly, guys, that's why we die, is that we fail to fight the fight against gravity. When gravity wins, we succumb. As far as purpose, I'm going to comment on a few things here that are somewhat related. One is called purpose. Later on, they talked about loved ones first and belonging. Well, there was a narrative here about the fact that you who are in a faith-based congregation, where not only the love of God and our Savior, but the love of each other is very evident around here, you live a lot longer, even if you don't move. And that's just, and we all know that to be true. And I'm not going to belabor that, but I'm sure Mercedes spent some time when she was discussing that with you. But that is so strong. Some of us were, talking earlier today that many of, as I travel many of our faith-based congregations to be welcomed and give talks, I have noticed that we are all of a certain age. And the generation younger, 20s and 30s and 40s, even though they may have grown up and enjoyed being members of the church, are not churching anymore. And our leaders of all of our denominations are struggling with this very problem. What have they found to replace it with? There are many things within the parochial and the public schools. There are multiple clubs, especially after the pandemic reconvening. I mean, it is a bit of a problem. I mean, people aren't really attaching themselves much anymore, and you've probably heard about this as well. These are one of the problems of our country. I know, I'm sure you're like many congregations, you are trying to invite people who are younger in, and isn't that so hard? I mean, we're all struggling with that very problem. And, the way I look at it is that we're not looking to necessarily proselytize our faith, but it's just healthier. And you don't live longer necessarily, but you live better. And we all know that to be true. And it's a gift that we all want to give people. And this is very much based, on scientific principles.
Excuse me.
Yes.
When you're talking about purpose, are you specifically talking about outward purpose? Because I know people that are really devoted to golf. I mean, that's their purpose. Mm-hmm. And they've got to golf 3 times or
Right.
They've got to golf 3 times or more a week, and that's the purpose that keeps them going.
My next example will suggest to you why I think golf is a perfectly acceptable. Let's say you're 100. And one thing that's important, I'm going to use the, one of the problems I have with my families of people who are older is that, let's say their older loved one is trying to develop neurocognitive impairment, dementia, issues like that. And then when someone who is younger starts to apply what they deem quality in their life to someone who might have some cognitive impairment, they start to think, well, what a sad life that they live. And many times, and I call this my Thanksgiving visit to my residents, is that I will have someone come in and they'll say, well, we took Grandpa up to Waterloo to celebrate Thanksgiving meal. He lives such a sad life in the nursing home. He can barely move anywhere. And so we're going to give him some excitement. We're going to we've got 18 grandchildren there. And then all of a sudden they come to me and they say, well, it was really uncomfortable. Grandpa started to hit the children, and they went over and he relieved himself on the wall of the living room. And I go, well, you know, and these people are like very loving, they're 32 years of age, and I said, hey, tell you what, I will bring you into Chuck E. Cheese's up in Cedar Rapids, and I'll surround you with 200 kids. We have a trampoline place in southeast Iowa City, same thing. I guarantee if I put a 32-year-old cognitively full person in there with 200 kids all screaming and yelling at the same time and expecting that they have to create some sort of controlled chaos, that person will start hitting the kids and probably relieve themselves on the wall. And so what I explain to them is that you can't put your life into theirs. The world as we get physically and cognitively impaired, our world shrinks. And that's okay. And we start to think, oh, wow, they can't travel anymore, poor them. Be careful in how you apply your own value systems and expectations on someone. Because you try and push your world on theirs, that can be a particular problem. So, golf. I try and tell my people who are 100 is that, if you can just get up and around and sit in the hallway and talk to the person in the room next to you for a few minutes a day, that would be great. And doesn't that seem sad? Now, you've got to put yourself into a different frame. So what people need to socialize, to expand their lives, to become healthy. I wouldn't recommend going down to the bar. I don't recommend going down to the casino down near Riverside. These are problematic sorts of things. Golf, I will take. Golf is a form of, and even if they can only do a cart, it's a form of Tai Chi. They're swinging, they're moving. I'll take what I can get. But that is a social form. And you have to be creative when you talk with people who do things like this. But and that's kind of having purpose. And the purpose might be philosophically thin. But having the purpose that you get up and you do something, even if you get up and maybe clean some aspect of the house or just go out and pick up litter, I talk with people about having that purpose. It's important.
I drive the trail of Johnson County. Are you familiar with trail?
The what trail?
Trail of Johnson County.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's very noticeable. Almost everyone I drive for is lonely. And I spend all my time listening and asking questions and so on. I think it's also interesting that so many young people are also lonely.
Yeah, and the pandemic didn't help that at all.
No.
And being male does not help
and
that.
That's right.
We guys don't de-lonely ourselves very well at all.
Yeah.
And so that's a particular problem. And we do not have the social media. Right. Is that bad? Is that good? Well, I think we're coming to figure out it's not very good at all because it allows you to have artificial relationships that aren't healthy.
Yeah.
And it kind of keeps you. I mean, if you're, I would argue MSNBC can be as bad as Fox if you're looking at it in that way, in terms of keeping you from having good relationships with other different people. This is something that a church like this is such a wellspring of kind of living, but it is unfortunate that churches is not something that younger generations are making part of their lives anymore. So it is a problem.
Yeah.
And please, thank you for the questions. These are great. There's some discussion here regarding downshifting and experiencing decreasing stress. Many of our medications now, I'm going to get a little sciencey here, so I apologize. But many of the advantages that we now have with cancer. Cancer is an amazing thing. I think we are all of similar age. Something that I often say to patients is that cancer in the 1970s, is nothing like it is now. The advances that we are making on cancer are nothing short of miraculous. Remember, if someone got cancer, you used to say, this is the end. And we have now said, well, it's now sort of becoming the beginning. There are certain cancers that are problematic, and certainly the connotation of cancer is that it's very horrific. But the incredible advance in medical science on cancer treatment has been nothing short of amazing. However, many of these medications, what they do is that they affect the immune system. And so as a non-oncologist, what do I have to tell my patients? Because I don't understand all the menus and potions of modern oncology. But what do I give to my patients? And I will talk about these blue zone sorts of things because the medications that we now basically manipulate our immune system. And our immune system is sometimes the best thing ever happened to us and the worst thing that ever happened to us. In fact, I remember a professor saying marriage was the same way. But these medications can take the life force and the spirit out of you. And so it's sort of funny when you see someone who's going through cancer treatment, you're sitting there thinking, well, maybe you shouldn't come to church, maybe we shouldn't invite you. But think of all these other aspects of healthy aging that are important as we get older, are even more important when someone is going through cancer treatment, because we don't want to exhaust them. But remember, they have to have meaning, and maybe their meaning is talking with you or participating in activities. Maybe it's convening and talking with people, because that is so uplifting. If I take a look at the trajectories of people who are currently going through immunotherapy for cancer, those people who are trying to maintain the other aspects of wellness have much better trajectories than people who are going through cancer. Cancer is no longer, I mean, it's not the end. It's just, you just experience cancer treatment. How you do at the other end of it is very much based on how you live your life during it. And I think a lot of us are maybe a tad overprotective of people who are currently having cancer or something like that. There was a discussion downstairs about where we all live. I think the hardest, I'm really glad when you called me, you didn't ask me to talk about how do I decide when it's time to put my loved one in a nursing home. I so hate that talk. Because the talk is particularly difficult in people of Northern Indo-European heritage. We tend to throw each other into the nursing home much faster than other cultures. And so I get into this difficult sort of situation where I'm in a setting like this, and I say, well, what is the number one reason people put into a nursing home? And I come up with some medicalese sort of thing to protect me, but the number one reason is selfishness. Selfishness. We want to live our lives, and we don't want to be necessarily bothered by taking care of somebody else who is older. Though if you take a look at what I've given you out, the data shows that if you have someone if you put yourself into a caregiver role, those people actually have better quality of life and longevity as well. Of course, to a point. But it's very much culturally based, and people like us who are Caucasian and European, we probably don't do the best in that sort of activity. I have families, and you would be, to this day I'm amazed, people who will be of Latino heritage, African American, Asian American, what they do for their older family members is nothing short of miraculous.
Native American probably too.
Yes, Native American. And I can't even bring it up. I mean, I will see them for the Medicare Wellness once a year. And I will talk with them, my social worker will talk with them, and they got it handled. They won't go to the emergency room, their people are happy, and I'm just nothing short of incredulous. So, there are issues of incontinence, which are problematic, aggressive behavior. Those are things that are beyond the pale and usually need, some intervention. But something short of that is something that some people make decisions on. Yeah.
Another community that's different are the Amish. We know an Amish story where a woman had cancer, and they don't have medical insurance, okay? And their insurance is their community. And so she went to Mexico for, what do you call it?
Cancer.
Yeah, cancer treatment and so on. And her whole family went along. They filled up the train.
Yeah.
They made an event out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is another aside. What a wonderful thing at UIHC is when the bursar. The bursar in the Amish tradition is someone who will basically collect the money. And one of their congregation will be at the hospital. And the bill will be unearthly. And they will go to the bursar and they will have like an incredible amount of money in $100 bills, $1,000 bills that they have. And that's what their job is. And they will walk up to the window. And now these people have been, since they're in Iowa and we're close to Amish communities, we've gotten used to this. But it is something to behold to have the bursar all of a sudden come in with a significant amount of money. Security is alerted because they want to make sure that this person is safe as they walk through and they get into their transportation. And they walk up to the window and the person is wide-eyed and they just pay them, "What was the bill, please?" Well, you don't have insurance. So, and of course you all realize that all insurance, basically, we charge up here, but what we actually pay is negotiated to 80, 90% down. While the person says, "I want to pay what everyone here is entitled." And the person's just embarrassed. I said, "I'm sorry, that's not what everybody does." And they go, "I want to pay what they're entitled." And they will pay thousands and thousands of dollars. They will pay at the top level. Oh. Yes. Wow. Yeah. Well, they don't come in all that much. But when they do, no, it's a sight to behold. When they come in, they do take care of their own. Iowa City, Coralville, North Liberty. Let me talk about where people go to stay and where wellness is practiced. It can be, if you're in a hospital and you need extra help as determined by physical therapy, occupational therapy, social work, physicians and nurses, and you need physical therapy, you will go to a nursing home. A nursing home in my business is called an intermediate care facility. An intermediate care facility that contracts to have physical therapy, which is the most frequent skilled care, will be called a skilled nursing facility as well. And almost all nursing homes are both intermediate care and skilled care. They are heavily, very much licensed and watched by the state government. Iowa probably has the least scrutiny of these various licensed places, but they are scrutinized to a degree. There are certain ratios of nurses to the people who are there. You may have heard some recent federal discussion about altering that ratio somewhat. But nonetheless, the important thing is in those areas, you have a certain prescribed ratio of caregivers to the people who live there. There are also lots of other rules regarding the distribution of medications, basic occupational standards, cleanliness, things like that. Assisted living is something entirely different. There's an old saying, if you've seen one assisted living facility, you've seen one assisted living facility. Because they are, came out of the care industry of Iowa saying, Iowans want something where they can go to and that isn't heavily overseen by government. It may depend on your political color or what you think about this, but assisted living can be almost anything. And so many of the places that a lot of you or your friends may live in, all around us, maybe even this place across the street, they will have something called memory care, assisted living. They'll have various euphemisms. All this is meaningless. It's all marketing. They are not held to any standard. It is very much let the buyer beware. And some of them are actually okay, and some of them decidedly are not. And so that's something to kind of be aware of, is that right now, affordability is a real problem in terms of where people would want to go. Oak Knoll, I think, is probably the gold standard of care, but I think people who live at Oak Knoll would tell you the affordability issue of that facility is very problematic. And so there's sort of the principle of fairness. And so I take care of people who are aging at all areas of the economic spectrum. And we have recently lost in Johnson County some of the more affordable types of places that people can go to that are the assisted living level of care. Medicaid will pay for you to go to a nursing home, but one, people have to pay down to $2,000 of their estate, and they don't want to do that. And two, a lot of people, frankly, just don't want to do that. Assisted living says, well, that's not so bad. Assisted living is more like home. Well, maybe it is, and maybe it isn't. And so I tell people that you have to, I tell them to be aware of the marble test. When you go into a place and you go into an assisted living place or a place that's independent living, assisted living, memory care, but you'll notice they don't have, you'll ask them, do you have like a nursing home? A nursing home is a bad word. And you have intermediate care facility. And it goes, oh, we don't need one. And so people who are consumers of going to places like this where they want to age gracefully, you have to be very aware that when you walk in, you may notice that the front door is beautiful marble. And then I will ask them, oh, this is beautiful marble. What a wonderful grand piano you have over there. What wonderful chandeliers. How many RNs are here? And they'll go, oh, well, we do have some nurses here. And then all of a sudden they change the subject. And so assisted living places, which are becoming the preponderance of places that people who are older go to, is independent living. And then they have assisted living. And assisted living ain't much assistance, you all. It's very little. And then you get to this point where all of a sudden, well, we'd like to have more services. Oh, we have them available. We contract them out. Now, they're not in the facility like they would be in intermediate care, and they contract them out to a very pretty penny. Physical therapy, speech therapy services if people have had a stroke or something like that. So the problem is that people get to that point in their lives where they really start to struggle. Even if you are a person of means, you will have problems here in Johnson County. And as our population ages and our demographic gets older, the rubber is going to hit the roads on this. I have great concerns where people are actually going to be living. Home health care is not very organized, and it's not very good. The people who work at it work hard, but we have a nursing shortage, and it's hard to compete with the RN pay scale of the University of Iowa hospitals and clinics. And so what you have is that you have a lot of people who are thinking and really struggling. And so this is sort of the difficulty that I have as people get older, is that they frankly don't have a place to live. Now, guys, that's a very provocative narrative that I just did. Please, are there any comments or questions?
There was a recent study, it was reported in the papers and on the news and so on, of Iowa, and Iowa was way down, like 43rd in the country in terms of the quality and availability of assisted living. And there were some places that actually got, even though the standards are not that great, got dinged, so they had to go out of business. I mean, it's dismal across the state.
Yeah. Well, Iowa has pretty much a agrarian spirit and philosophy, even though some of us wouldn't even know what a farm is. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Seeking care through religious organizations who, frankly, are not terribly, able to handle these sorts of things. But it gets to be a problem. But there's a theory in here is that, we just take care of our own and you just deal with it. And that's what I do. I deal with families, and I'm trying to help them, universal design in their house, trying to make it so their older loved ones can start, maybe to live with them. One of the reasons I was actually on Iowa City Council for a time, and much of that reason were for these types of issues where I was trying to, take care of people. Is I basically went into politics because I thought those are the people who really help people age well. As a physician, I don't know if I did anything. But it was to get these sorts of things where people, could go, like adult daycare, where people could go to for some respite. These things, it's amazing, as progressive as Johnson County is, how minimal those sorts of things are.
There's a moratorium right now on new nursing homes in the state. I'm not sure why, but Oaknoll wants to put in some more. Oaknoll, for 5 of us, I was counting, 5 of us live in Oaknoll. We need to put in more licensed areas because we have so many in independent right now, but we need permission because of a moratorium on nursing homes in the state. Mm-hmm. I don't know why.
No, I'm not sure. I can't help with that. What a moratorium would be.
We just need a waiver to get it done.
Oh yeah, that's a legal requirement. Probably people ask me, what's the answer with all this? Probably one of the best answers is something that was invented, and I was talking about it with Emily downstairs. Any of you familiar with Methwick up in Cedar Rapids? Okay. Methwick, the Methodist Church, and the Wickman family, I think, put this together. Think of Oaknoll, and Oaknoll is starting to get away from just the building, but think of it as a campus. Think of where you have multiple buildings. There's in Iowa City, I'm trying to think of off Benton, there's sort of a bunch of houses, a congregate housing group that's between Highway 1 and Benton. It's on the hill there. Some of you may have seen it. It's basically a congregate sort of housing sort of thing. Think of something like that. But it's for people who are older. Not entirely, but mostly. One place will be for skilled nursing. One place will be intermediate care. Other would be assisted. Other would be independent. It would be universal design. They had congregate meeting halls. They would also have families. And Methwick is actually thinking about this, but this is the design of the future, is that you have small little communities. This is sort of, when you take a look at urban design, I've got a friend who was mayor, Jim Throgmorton, years ago, and we would talk about this as a vision, is that you would actually have campuses like Methwick, where you would have the full range of services. You all familiar with the Birdhouse? The Birdhouse is a hospice house north of Iowa City. You would have a house devoted to that as well, too. And you would have some flexibility with some of these places. You could, what they call, live in place. right on the campus. You would have the staff there that would go from building to building. Yeah, it gets a little bit cold in the winter, but it isn't far. And then you could actually maintain a business. You don't have to have the problems at home care nurses where you have such incredible travel costs. And this is sort of what the future is, because the cost of this is far less than Oak Knoll. It's much more affordable. It still has that congregate feeling at home sort of thing. It is a compromise between living at home and living maybe in a facility, which is a bit on the sterile side. This is what's coming, everybody. As you wonder what's going to happen with the baby boomer generation as we move into we're going to demand, and we do vote, we're going to demand these sorts of things. And you're going to see more things like this. You're starting to see Oak Knoll do it because they're buying houses here and there. They're starting to have this spirit. Joe?
Yeah, what I'm gathering is that one of the secrets of a good living and good aging is being part of a community. So it could be a faith community, or it could be some other physical community like Oak Knoll or something else. But there's another one too along Benton Street. It's called Prairie Hill. And Prairie Hill, if you're not aware of it, is a group of private homes with a central meeting room, and they emphasize community
I think that's what I was
events.
talking about. That may be that's what I was talking about. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's perfect, Jim. That is exactly.
and that seems to be one of the answers.
Now, it's on a hill. And so moving is not very, so it could be flatter. Other than that, that is a perfect example of the kind of congregate living. That's actually where my wife and I would like to move to a place like this, in the future. It has all the elements of the Blue Zone style. It makes you walk, it makes you move a little bit. There's purposefulness that they build into that.
And those types of communities are not limited to people over 65. They can house young families.
And that's what they do. And what they'll do is that they'll have a family, and it's nice to have kids around. You like to have tricycles. People who are older don't necessarily want to live amongst just themselves. They want to have kids in the neighborhood too. And they will actually hire families part-time to do some of the care work and the socialization, plus their regular job. It's sort of a defray on costs of the housing that they get. So this is kind of the future of what we're taking a look at. Unfortunately, I was not terribly friendly towards those sorts of things. It's more for assisted living. But I think assisted living I think a lot of people are finding out that it just is not what they thought it was going to be.
Rick Oak Knoll has bought 50 acres just past Menards, and I hope they'll do that kind of thing there.
Yeah, I have mentioned that to them. It's something to do. It's still what we need. We need something that's more affordable. Oak Knoll isn't that kind of place. But hopefully that is what Oak Knoll will do with that land. It's flat. That actually might be end up where I live out my life.
They're waiting for city services. It's not in the city limits yet.
Right, yes. Yeah. The people of Aber Avenue were very aware when their street was torn up and they built a sewer under their street. And I said, what's that for? And I'm saying, well, it's for me when I get older.
Could you please say a little bit more about your experience with government? Because it seems to me a lot of these problems have to be solved from a meta perspective and policy. Or did you just give up in despair? Or what
Well,
happened?
I got relieved by the voters. But
What radical thing did you propose that?
oh, that was politics. That was nothing. It was just as far as what. But what I was doing was that I was trying to get a place like these, rather than all these senior living places that you've seen on Foster Road, on Camp Cardinal Road, that are basically all sort of the same: independent living, assisted living, and then all of a sudden, when you need more cares, where do you go from there? And people just don't kind of think about that. But that's where I live. I take care of people in their 80s and 90s and in their 100s when they get to that point in their lives. And so that's what we were trying to figure out is there are actually places that have large universities. North Carolina, Notre Dame, University of Pennsylvania. They have places that are sort of have campus themed. You know that downtown hotel that's in Iowa City? The hotel that never seems to be able to make it. Right, the Graduate. That's this latest there. Yeah, the Graduate. They have sort of a university theme. In some large, there are a lot of people who have been affiliated with major university, like the town. University communities are really popular for people who are older. Got it? I mean, Manhattan, Kansas. It's South Bend, Indiana. I mean, these places are very, and I was trying to work with getting, the city and getting those going. I've run afoul of bar owners by, pushing against what they wanted to do. I've run afoul of Oak Knoll and other nursing homes because they saw it as competition. And so, these things happen when you try and, so you mentioned some of the frustration that happens when you try and do things like that, but you have these conversations. But everything has its time. And it gets to the point where the population will get older. And the Iowa City community is getting very close to where we have a critical mass of people who are getting old and starting to think about, hey, maybe I didn't have all the options I needed to basically age well. And certainly people who are less lucky than I in terms of their finances do not have options. And so eventually this will hit a critical mass. And so sometimes it's all about timing in terms of politics.
Rick, I'm wondering if you could cover some of the other
Sure.
ones here, just to, things that we can be doing now.
The 80% rule, here's the 80% rule. Everybody knows what a pizza is, right? Okay, all right, this is the approximate size of a pizza. 80% rule is basically portion control. Our human brains are made to eat voraciously, back from thousands and thousands of years ago. If you would basically perseverate about eating food, you would survive, and survive to reproduce and have progeny. Nowadays, we have Kentucky Fried Chicken and McDonald's and Burger King, and what was usually a very protective factor is no longer very good. And so we have to learn to fight a natural tendency. The other natural tendency is that by the time the stomach signals the brain that we are satiated, it takes about 20 to 30 minutes. But how soon does the average American eat their meal? Well, I learned in medical school to eat my entire dinner meal in 90 seconds. That's what my resident internal medicine at Minneapolis VA taught me. And so you take your amount of food on your plate. And what I tell people is you force yourself to basically put it in half. And you eat half of that. And you're going, wow, I've really got to force myself to do that. I go, yeah, but here's the promise. If you're still hungry in 20 to 30 minutes, what you do is that you eat half of that again. Okay? And so we eat that amount of food. And if you're hungry again, another 20 to 30 minutes, let's say you eat this much. Okay? And that's what you do. And if you get to it, if you start to add up, 50% plus 25 plus 12.5, that equals approximately 80. And what you're doing is you're slowing down. Now, what you'll find out if you wait 20 to 30 minutes, you've actually moved on in your life. You've gone on to doing other things, and you'll kind of forget about it. Well, that's because your brain is no longer sending these powerful signals. And yes, it is from the same part of the brain that there's addiction, for heroin and gambling and sex and all those other good things. And so it's a very powerful part of the brain. So, of course, you ask about Ozempic. Okay. Well, the GLP-1 agonists are the first in a class of medications that actually go after the kind of hormones that the brain uses to communicate with the stomach and vice versa, just send these signals of, I need to eat. And they are called incretins, is the molecular family. And they antagonize the incretins, and you actually elude your, I think they refer to it as food thinking. You no longer think about food. And so this is nothing short of miraculous. Have you ever wondered, like 10 years ago, if only they had a pill that could basically take away, and the doctor could give me a certain amount of milligrams, and it would bring me down to a certain amount of weight. Well, guess what, everybody? It now exists. And these are that class of medications. Now, they're the first in the class. They have a lot of problems associated with them, stomach irritation, stuff like that. But the 80% rule is trying to do a psychological workaround to the need that we have to eat, which back in the day used to make us survive, and now it isn't so particularly helpful anymore. By the way, you can be heavy, and if you move and exercise, a significant amount of the risk afforded with obesity is gone. Just to let you know. So people go, oh, I don't lose weight. Just get up and move. Now, if the obesity causes degenerative arthritis, then you've got a problem there. But that's important. That's why, again, Move Naturally is number one on the list. But the 80% rule now has a pharmacologic workaround. And that's what the Ozempic medications are about. Trulicity is another one, stuff like that. It's unaffordable now. But the time will come. You know how this works, where all of a sudden we'll be able to restructure that. So, how much time do I have? I think it's just a few minutes. Or am I done?
5 minutes or so.
Okay, let me talk about wine. I put that down. Not celebratory wine that we use in our faith tradition, but this number 6 here, that's no longer really accurate. Remember the day when they said that people who don't drink wine at all or any alcoholic beverages actually don't live as long as people who do? You know, I'll tell you, nutritional epidemiology is the most difficult kind of public health epidemiologic tracking to do. It's rife with systemic bias. And so they've looked at that, and probably that was due to the fact that people who weren't drinking at all probably had other behaviors that were indirectly associated with not being able to drink, like medical illness and stuff like that. So it's probably not all that good, especially if you get older. Alcohol, almost any significant increase, it can be problematic. So I tell people who, for instance, what is safe? If you had, 3 glasses of wine, maybe at a week like this, that is absolutely safe and there's no problem. The thing is that every once in a while people have something like this, and then you do it 5 times, and that's called alcohol creep. And that starts to make you feel lousy, especially when you're older, 65, 70 years of age. Alcohol, to all humans, is a slow poison, but our ability to absorb it, metabolize it, handle it becomes much less efficient as we get older. So,
Are you telling us to ignore number 6?
yeah, ignore number 6. The suggestion here is that that's probably, and I put that down there because this is, when you go on the internet, this is what you'll see. But that is probably the one that has been, the most discounted. I mean, zero alcohol is not, necessarily is not what we strive for, but we just got to keep it down. Plant slant, basically the Mediterranean diet. I have found, this was looking at the American diet about 25 years ago. Well, the American diet, even in Iowa, has significantly decreased in terms, and we all recognize that, right? Aren't we all eating less fat, than we used to? And so I think that's sort of a natural thing that, that has happened along with,
So it's improving?
It is improving, like with tobacco smoking. It is getting better in terms of what we're eating, just naturally. You know, we'll start to have plant-based. Have any of you had like a plant-based meat, like a fake meat or something? They're actually quite good. But we're pushing against agricultural industry to be able to fight that, especially in the state of Iowa. But it's, I think the latest thing is that the pork producer wants it very clearly that this is not a meat. Well, that's okay, you know that. But I think that further decreases our reliance on meat products. And I think most people are starting to do that now, just naturally. So.
There was an article this last week, I can't remember if it was in the Times or Post, talking about happiness. And it was saying that very important factors in happiness are a good marriage and enough money. Those two factors. And it relates to what's on the back side about sociality, you know, good relationships and so on.
Yeah. Boy, that leaves me as a physician very little to work with. Which would be true. But, you know, I have to redefine these things. You mean like being loved? Maybe it's just me, but I'm noticing sort of in the narrative of church life that love has always been a big part of it, but I think clergy are now, or maybe it's just me because I'm paying attention, you know, to these sorts of things. But the word love is actually even, you know, and when I go to various places of faith, love is becoming a more prevalent word that people are talking about. I don't know, maybe it's after the pandemic. I'm not quite sure, but it's something that I have noticed. And, you know, the ability to love somebody, as Jesus taught us, is such a wonderful thing. Jesus, the ultimate physician. So, anyway, we're getting near that time. I'll stick around if any of you have more private or personal questions you want to ask me. I'd be happy to do that. I'll end my question with you. Yeah.
Okay, so I've been surreptitiously looking at this list, and I see number 7 is belong, and number 9 is the right tribe. So what's the difference between that?
Well, those two were very, and I kind of scrunched those together when I talked a little bit early in terms of purpose. I think that the salient difference between the right tribe is that talking about your specific social circle, you know, that people will have. Belonging is, it's got two sides of the same coin. You know, the right tribe is someone who kind of fits your nature to a certain degree. Belonging is just a sense of belonging to a group. I had a problem with the wine. I have a little bit problems with belong. I think it's probably because of what's happening in our country today. Some people, let's see, what are people? I can't believe they think that. Well, the power of social psychology is so strong that I assure you in Guyana, if you were a follower of Jim Jones, that you would drink a certain Kool-Aid because of your belief system. And so the issue of cult is such a powerful driver. And so I don't really touch, again, I put belong because that's in the original literature. But I think there are some people who belong to their group a little too much, and perhaps to their tribe a little too much. And I think this is something that didn't much bother me. But I'm very cautious when I talk to people about joining groups, about what kind of group that they join. And I'll sit there and I'll talk about have a group where different thoughts and ideas are welcome. I may be talking about their AA group, I may be talking about their faith-based religion, but I'm now a little bit more cautious about the right tribe and belonging, because some people nowadays I think they're taking that a little bit too strongly and specifically. I would not have thought that 10, 15 years ago. There's a lot of things I would not have thought about 10, 15 years ago.
Well, thank you so much, Rick. What a wonderful presentation. And we all have our Blue Zones primer sheet here, so, and
Good luck,
Yeah.
and age well, whatever age you are. Thank
That
you
was
very much.
just
Yes.
wonderful.
I,
So helpful and applicable.
when you put it,